Busy morning.
Multiple sources reporting now that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is the pick to be Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate.
In fact, the pair will hold their first rally today in Philadelphia. Political science professor Kathryn Pearson joins us now this morning with more analysis on this pick. Good morning. Thanks for joining here. We knew he was, all indication, he was kind of in the final two. We knew the pick was going to come down sometime today. Just your first thoughts, hearing that it is Walz.
I mean, this is tremendous news. 2 weeks ago, when Vice President Harris became the presumptive nominee when President Joe Biden stepped aside of running for office, he was on the long list. There was a lot of speculation that he would be in the mix as a Democratic governor from a Midwestern state, having served in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing a rural background, bringing demographic diversity, a totally different background and life experience. So he's always been in the mix. But as he's interviewed for the position, essentially by going on national television, sort of interview after interview, it's become clear that he got down to the finals. And as of this morning, he had a 50-50 chance, and now it is Walz. And so it's really tremendous for Minnesota, and obviously very exciting for Walz and Democrats in Minnesota.
Now, is always the case in these is they look for balance in a ticket, and so you kind of thought that, okay, we've got a Californian, maybe they would look to balance it. That's where Mark Kelly got a lot of attention. Here's somebody from a southern border state, battleground state, or you had Kentucky. You had Michigan, a battleground state, and that's where Walz initially was seen maybe a little bit lower on the short list. What do you think changed it?
Well, that's right, because Minnesota leans Democratic. It's still a competitive state, but it's not considered one of those key swing states in the way that Pennsylvania is, where Governor Josh Shapiro serves, or the way that Arizona is, where Senator Mark Kelly serves. But electoral considerations certainly matter, and I think it is likely that the Harris campaign is thinking that electorally he will both, make the Democratic base happy, but yet also appeal to some rural voters who may have defected from Democrats in the past, given his background, his experience coming from Mankato as a high school social studies teacher in the Army National Guard. But it is also the case that candidates are looking for partners in governing. And so I think that's where the interview process really comes in. And that's also where Walz's experience, both as a Democratic governor in his second term and as a member of the U.S. House for 12 years, really comes into play as well. So obviously the electoral calculations are huge, but it's also about looking for a partner in governing.
You mentioned his experience. With that comes, obviously, a track record. And the Harris campaign will use that to their advantage, highlighting what they think are perks. The GOP will use that as what they think are negatives towards Walz. I asked the same question to you. What do you think will play on both sides?
That's right. Well, Democrats will certainly point to a very successful session with the DFL trifecta. Governor Walz signed a lot of Democratic priorities into law, and so that will certainly be something that Democrats campaign on. On the other hand, Republicans will point to the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, sort of Minneapolis burning, and also point to Governor Walz's more liberal record as governor compared to his record in the House of Representatives. So, with any choice, there's going to be a long record that comes with positives and negatives. And I think that, the entire country will learn more about both those things in the days and weeks to come.
When you compare him to the other finalists on that list, do you think his list of negatives was potentially shorter than some of those other candidates, that they had more, problem areas in their records?
I do, because in addition to looking for a partner in governing and someone who's electorally appealing, there is a rule, do no harm. And so I do think that, for Democrats, the positives of Governor Walz, greatly outweigh any negatives. I mean, any candidate is going to have, things that are going to be used against him, but relative to the other candidates who were vetted, I think that Walz's list of negatives is shorter. And then he also brings, I think, an energy to the ticket that it's likely that the Harris campaign found appealing.
All right, Kathryn, let's talk about Minnesota specifically. So now that he is on the ticket for the Harris campaign, what does that mean for the governor role?
Well, if he becomes vice president, it means that Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan will become governor. That is stipulated by law. And then at that point, the president of the Senate, Bobby Joe Champion, also a DFLer, would become the lieutenant governor, and then his seat would be vacant.
During the campaigning, though, he would still remain governor?
Yes. During the campaign, he would still be governor.
And then what do you see this meaning for Minnesota in terms of, I mean, does this make this more of a campaign stop, or is it irrelevant that the running mate is from this state and they're going to focus on other parts of the country?
They're going to focus on the key swing states. I think it was always likely that Minnesota may get a visit or two from both sides during the campaign. But again, Minnesota is a state that is competitive but leans Democratic. And so just looking at the campaign schedule for this week, both of the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign, with J.D. Vance sort of following them around, it's pretty clear that they're focusing on those key swing states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia.
Do you think that this changes anything with some of those key states? Does that go one way or the other? Is there one state that you think now will turn blue or turn red because Walz is named?
I mean, I think definitely the proximity to Wisconsin and Michigan will be helpful. But I see this more as sort of an electoral choice to energize the ticket and, not necessarily bring in any particular state, although I think it will be helpful in the upper Midwest, certainly.
How do you think of then Walz matching up with J.D. Vance? Presumably there typically is a debate between the vice presidential candidates here. And how do you see that matchup playing out?
I think it is fascinating because I think that both candidates will offer very different sort of visions of what they got out of their rural experiences growing up. Walz is from Nebraska, then of course came from Mankato, represented Minnesota's 1st district, was in the Army National Guard, a social studies teacher. And so I think that contrast with J.D. Vance, who of course is also from rural America, wrote Hillbilly Elegy, went on to Yale, Silicon Valley, and then of course the U.S. Senate. I think that they have obviously contrasting policy views, but will both draw upon their rural backgrounds in some very distinct ways during the campaign.
It'll be interesting to watch for sure. And it's just getting started. We're at like 95 days out or something,
yeah,
plus or minus. Kathryn Pearson, thank you so much. We appreciate you zooming in with us and kind of picking our brain.